Hi everyone, welcome to today's wellness session. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. So today we're going to continue our conversation about child abuse. And with me today is Erica Harris-Henderson. And she is doing her social work internship with the Early County School System. And she also works at the Patala Center for Children. Hey Erica. Would you tell us a little bit about the work that you do at the Child Advocacy Center?
Sure. I'm the forensic interviewer and the services coordinator. In doing the forensic interviews, I work with children where there are allegations of sexual or physical abuse or children that have witnessed crimes. As the services coordinator, I work to make proper referrals and connect these families with the resources that are available in our area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So today we're going to be talking about recognizing abuse. So we're going to define the 4 types of abuse: physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, and sexual abuse. And we're going to talk about physical and behavioral indicators for each of those. The first type of abuse that we want to talk about is physical abuse. The definition for physical abuse, according to Georgia law, OCGA 15-11-2, is any non-accidental physical injury or physical injury which is inconsistent with the explanation given for it suffered by a child as a result of the acts or omissions of a person responsible for the care of a child.
Physical indicators of physical abuse are unexplained bruises and welts, unexplained burns, unexplained fractures and dislocations, bald patches on the scalp.
And I'm going to go over some behavioral indicators. So a child that's experiencing abuse may feel like they deserve the punishment, or they may be wary or uneasy around a specific adult, or be wary of physical contact in general. They may be frightened of their parents or afraid to go home. They may engage in self-destructive behaviors like cutting themselves, face slapping, hair pulling, burning themselves, things like that. And they may wear clothing to cover their body. So let's just say it's really hot and they're wearing, long pants and sweaters to cover their body.
Next, we have emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is typically the hardest to prove because it's the child's word against the adult's word. Examples of emotional abuse is name calling. What this looks like is an adult telling the child, "You're stupid, you're ugly, you're just like your no good dad, you're just like your no good mom," things of that nature. And next example is shaming. What this looks like is an adult telling the child, "You're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too dark, you're too light." Rejection or withholding love. What this looks like is an adult not meeting the child's emotional needs, not telling the child that they are loved, not responding when the child calls. Another example is threatening. This can be an adult telling the child that "I'm gonna physically do something to you," or "I'm gonna call the police," "I'm gonna leave you somewhere," things of that nature.
The next type of abuse we're going to talk about is neglect. The definition of child neglect, according to Georgia law, OCGA 49-5-180, reads as follows: the failure to provide proper parental care or control, subsistence, education as required by law, or other care or control necessary for a child's physical, mental, or emotional health or morals. The failure to provide a child with adequate supervision necessary for such child's well-being, or the abandonment of a child by his or her parent, guardian, or legal custodian. So basically what this is saying is if you're not meeting your child's physical, mental, and emotional needs, then that could be considered neglect. There are 4 different types of neglect. Physical neglect could consist of a child their hygiene needs not being met, which could look like them not having hygiene products that they need, such as soap, toothpaste, toothbrush, wash rag, water, things like that. Or it could look like the caregiver not taking responsibility to ensure that the child is bathing, is brushing their teeth, washing their hair, things like that. Physical neglect could also include the physical environment, such as shelter and food. Next is medical neglect, and this could look like the child having some kind of medical condition, and the caregiver is not taking the responsibility to ensure that they follow up with their primary care physician for regular checkups or in response to whatever condition they have. Next is emotional neglect, and this goes back to the examples that Erica gave about emotional abuse. Those examples that she gave would fall into this category of not meeting the child's emotional needs. And the last one is educational neglect. For the most part, this would look like not sending your child to school on a regular basis without having some kind of excuse for not having them there and not keeping in good communication with the school, which usually results in a child being unsuccessful academically when they're not at school on a regular basis.
Physical indicators of neglect are consistent hunger, underweight or overweight, poor hygiene, consistent lack of supervision, unattended physical and medical needs, failure to thrive or poor growth, distended stomachs, which is a symptom of malnutrition, and inappropriate dress.
Some behavioral indicators are self-destructive behaviors, as we discussed earlier with physical abuse, begging or stealing food, extended stays at school. So this could look like the child being dropped off earlier, like before school, and staying later. Like even if they're staying for after school, then their parent or caregiver is late to pick them up even then. Constant fatigue. Assuming adult responsibilities, so maybe trying to take care of things around the house, or being responsible for younger siblings even though they're not old enough to take care of themselves, things like that. The child may say that there's no caretaker at home for long periods of time, and frequently absent or tardy from school.
Sexual abuse is the exploitation of a child for the sexual gratification of an adult or other child. Sex abuse is most commonly perpetrated by an individual known to the victim. Rarely is the offender a stranger. 1/3 of all sexual abuse is perpetrated by another child. Sex abuse includes fondling, sodomy, rape, child prostitution, indecent exposure, exhibitionism, utilizing the internet as a vehicle for exploitation.
Some physical indicators of sexual abuse include difficulty walking or sitting, torn, stained, or bloody underclothes, pain, swelling, or itching in the genital area, pain when urinating, bruises, bleeding, or lacerations in external genitalia area, presence of a sexually transmitted infection or disease, frequent urinary or yeast infections.
Behavioral indicators of sexual abuse are inappropriate sex play or advanced sexual knowledge of promiscuity, hysteria, lack of emotional control, sudden school difficulties, withdrawal or depression, excessive worrying about siblings, difficult peer relationships, resist involvement with peers, self-imposed social isolation, avoidance of physical contact or closeness, and sudden massive weight change, either loss or gain. Bedwetting, excessive desire for perfection, as well as changes in hygiene are also indicators of sexual abuse.
As you can see, there are many indicators that a child may be experiencing abuse. The indicators that we shared today are by no means an inclusive list. There are other warning signs that a child may be experiencing abuse, including reports of somatic or physical complaints like their stomach hurting or frequent headaches when they haven't had those before. Please note that even if you have noticed or recognized some of these indicators or warning signs within your child or another child, that doesn't necessarily mean they're being abused. It could be something else that's going on. In our upcoming sessions, we'll be talking about what to do when you do recognize some of these signs of abuse and how you can report them to get the child some help. Thank you for joining today's session, and I hope you'll stay tuned for our upcoming sessions.